She was the doctor. I was the patient. And neither of those words explains what happened when she closed the chart, really looked at me, and said exactly what I needed to hear without me even asking. 6 minutes. The consultation lasted 6 minutes. And I'm still here 10 days later trying to understand what she meant by that. She didn't touch me. She didn't give me her number. She didn't do anything anyone could point to. And yet there's something about her that I can't shake off. And I need to understand what it is. If you've ever found yourself thinking about someone, you shouldn't subscribe to the channel right now. This is the place for it. And tell me in the comments, where are you hearing this story from today? I wake up at 6:47 in the morning, and the first thought I have isn't about coffee. It isn't about work. It isn't about the list of things I needed to have done yesterday. The first thought is about her. About the way she said my name when she entered the room. Not my last name like the others do, my first name. With a familiarity she couldn't possibly have, and yet she did. I lie here staring at the ceiling of my room in Portland, and the light is still that blue-gray of October that makes me feel like the day hasn't really decided to begin yet. My apartment is quiet. My cup of coffee is getting cold on the counter because I forgot to drink it while I was standing here in the middle of the room, not knowing exactly what I was doing. I am 37 years old. I have been a project manager for 9 years. I don't just stand in the middle of the room. But I've been staying here for 10 days. For the past 10 days, I've woken up and my mind has gone straight to a moment that lasted less than a minute, a comment. A phrase uttered by a woman I'd never seen before and probably won't see again. A doctor. 27 years old, I reckon, judging by the way she moved around the office with that mixture of newfound confidence and deliberate care, someone who still remembers choosing that profession. She wasn't my usual doctor. Dr. Hensley was on leave and I needed to renew a prescription, nothing urgent, nothing dramatic. Just a routine appointment on a Tuesday when I had a meeting at 3 and wanted to leave in 20 minutes. I left in 6. And I took something with me that I don't know how to name. I keep trying to reconstruct the moment, as if it were a scene from a movie I watched distractedly and now need to rewatch. The desk, her computer turned sideways. The window overlooking a quiet street with trees that were already beginning to lose their leaves. The slightly antiseptic smell that every doctor's office has, but which I barely noticed that day because there was something else in the air. Something softer. Perhaps hers. And then she closed the chart, turned to me and said that. I'm not going to tell you what she said yet. Because before I tell you what she said, I need to tell you who I was feeling that day. What state I was in when I entered that room. Because maybe her words weren't extraordinary. Perhaps the extraordinary thing was me. Perhaps I was so empty that anything that arrived carefully would fit. The waiting room was nearly full when I arrived. Light blue plastic seats, a television in the corner showing something about the weather, a child coloring on the floor near her mother. I stood by the window because I don't like sitting in places I didn't choose to be, an old, somewhat strange habit that my ex always criticized with that affectionate irony she had. I'll stop thinking about it. I was listening to a podcast about supply chain logistics because that's what I do. I optimize. I plan. I don't just sit around doing nothing when they called my name. I took off my headphones. I put my phone away. I went in. She had her back to me when I walked in, reading something on the screen. Her dark hair was tied up in a low bun with a few strands escaping on one side, as if she'd quickly put it up between patients. White lab coat. White sneakers. Something about that combination of white with the slightly undone bun gave me the impression of someone who takes care of herself without worrying too much about it, which is rare, and I notice when it's rare. She turned around. Hi, Claire. A brief functional smile, but her eyes weren't functional. Her eyes were attentive in a different way. You can sit down. I sat down. She asked the usual questions. Blood pressure, sleep, Any changes since the last time? I answered on autopilot, no, more or less. She wrote without looking at me, and I watched the side of her face as she typed. Her concentration had a physical weight. It was like being near someone who is completely present and realizing how rarely you find that. Nothing happened. Objectively, absolutely nothing happened. She asked about sleep again, in a different way. Not, are you sleeping well? But when you wake up in the middle of the night, what comes first? A thought or a feeling? And I stared at her for a second that was far too long because no one had ever broken it down like that. As if she knew they were different things. As if she knew that for me it's always the feeling first, a weight in my chest that only later becomes words. Feeling, I said. She wrote it down. She didn't comment. But there was something about the way she wrote it down, a slight, almost imperceptible movement of her head, that gave me the impression that that answer mattered to her in some way. I don't know why this stayed with me. Sometimes I think it wasn't what she said at the end that struck me. Sometimes I think it was that moment, her asking in a way that assumed I was complex, and me discovering that I desperately needed someone to assume that there's something about the body that nobody really tells you. It registers before you do. The mind is still organizing, still constructing a narrative, still trying to decide what it means, and the body already knows. It's already decided. It's already responding to something you haven't even consciously admitted. I realize that now looking back. In the doctor's office, when she stood up to take my blood pressure, a routine, completely protocol-driven procedure, and stayed by my side for a moment while the cuff inflated, I felt my breathing change. Not dramatically. No one would have noticed. But I felt it. A slight retention, like when you're about to hear something important and your body stops making noise on its own. She looked at the monitor. It's great. She let go of the armband. I expired. She went back to her chair and I was left wondering if I had just held my breath because of a routine blood pressure check, which would be pathetic, or because of her proximity, which would be something else. The problem is that I don't have that kind of reaction often. I never have. I'm a person of constant temperament. That's what they say about me. That's what I believe about myself. I process things. I don't get breathless. But I stayed there. In the days that followed, my body kept remembering before I did. I'd walk past a pharmacy and smell that slightly antiseptic scent, and something would quicken for a second before I realized why. I'd hear someone typing with that specific cadence, focused, steady, and I'd look up, expecting to see, what, exactly? She's nowhere in my daily life. She has no reason to be. But the body didn't understand that memo. On the Thursday after the consultation, I was in a kickoff meeting with a new client, and the sun was coming through the window in a way that created a long, diagonal shadow on the floor, and I thought about it. No transition, no logic. I just thought. And it took me about 3 seconds to get back to the meeting, which isn't much, but for me it's an eternity. Who never lose track of things. I went to the bathroom during break and stared at my reflection for longer than necessary. 37 years old. 2 serious relationships, both with women. One of them lasted almost 5 years. And when it ended, I thought it would take a long time to feel something new. And it did. 2 years and a bit of a kind of emotional numbness that I called stability because it was easier. I was coming out of this anesthesia. Or maybe I had already left and hadn't realized it until I walked into a doctor's office on a Tuesday in October and had my blood pressure taken by someone holding the instrument as if the following week I received a call from the clinic. My heart did something ridiculous before I answered. It was just the receptionist, confirming that my prescription was ready for pickup. 20 seconds of conversation, nothing more. I hung up and stared at the phone as if it had played a trick on me, which, technically, it hadn't. I was the one who played a trick on myself. But I went to pick up the prescription in person when I could have asked them to send it. I told myself it was because I was going to pass by it anyway. I wasn't. The clinic was smaller than I remembered, or maybe I was paying more attention this time. Beige hallway. Artificial plants near the reception area. An elderly woman leafing through a magazine without looking at the pages. I picked up the prescription at the counter, signed where instructed, and was turning to leave when I heard a voice in the side hallway. I was conversing with someone, another professional, judging by their posture and lab coat about some protocol. Some patient, technical terms I didn't understand, but which she used with that specific cadence I had unintentionally memorized. I laughed briefly at something. A low, restrained laugh. I didn't move for a second. Then I walked. She saw me when I was almost at the door. I felt it before I saw it. Again the body in front of me, and there was a microscopic pause in her conversation before she said, in a casual tone that I don't know if it really was casual, "Claire, hi." I turned around. "Hi." Stupid. Monosyllabic. 10 years of meetings with directors and this is what comes out. "Recipe ready?" she asked, glancing briefly at the envelope in my hand. "Yes, thank you." She nodded. She smiled, not a functional smile this time. Something a little different, more to one side of her face. "Take care of your sleep," she said. And she went back to her conversation. I left. I went to my car, put the envelope on the passenger seat, turned on the heater because October in Portland is so cold it gets into your shoulders, and sat there for about 2 minutes without starting the engine. Quita do sono. It was exactly the kind of thing any doctor would say to any patient. A standard instruction, a routine reminder. There was nothing there. I know there was nothing there. And yet, however, there was the fact that she had recognized me in the hallway of a busy clinic after a 6-minute appointment a week earlier. She had paused. She had said my name. Maybe she does that to everyone. She probably does this to everyone. I really needed her not to do it. There's a huge difference between feeling something and recognizing that you're feeling it. The feeling appears on its own. It doesn't ask permission. It doesn't wait for the right moment. It doesn't consider whether you have space for it. Recognition is a choice. And sometimes you postpone that choice for so long that it becomes inevitable. It was on a Friday night that I stopped putting it off. I was home alone, which isn't unusual. I've lived alone for 3 years and generally enjoy it with a glass of red wine and a documentary I wasn't really watching. The window was slightly open because I needed some air, and the street below had that specific Friday sound. People leaving, cars passing by, someone laughing somewhere I couldn't see. And I was thinking about her again. Not trying to stop, just letting go. For the first time, letting go without resistance. I kept thinking about the way she had asked me about sleep, thought or sensation, and how that question had struck me in a place I didn't know was exposed. How she had looked at me when I answered sensation, not with surprise, but with something that seemed like recognition. As if she knew what it's like to wake up with a weight on your chest that still doesn't have words. I kept thinking about her laughter in the hallway. And the "take care of your sleep" that sounded like something more but probably wasn't. And then I started thinking about why I needed it to be something more so badly. That was the part that hurt a little. Because I know who I am. I know what I feel, and when I start to feel it, I'm good at it. Actually, I'm more honest with myself than with almost anyone else. And what I was feeling wasn't a movie projection or a romanticization of a banal moment. It was attraction. It was interest. It was that specific way of wanting to know more about someone that begins before you even have the vocabulary for it. I was interested in her. A woman I saw for 6 minutes plus another 30 seconds in the hallway. A doctor. 10 years younger, who was attentive because it's her job to be attentive. I looked at the ceiling of my apartment and almost laughed, not with happiness, but at the gentle absurdity of the situation. 2 years of emotional numbness, and this is what wakes me up. A question about sleep. A slightly undone bun. A comment that didn't need to be made. I didn't do anything with that recognition that night. I just let it exist. And it was strange how much space it took up when I stopped trying to make it smaller. I didn't go back to the clinic. I had no real reason to go back. My prescription was renewed. My health was stable, and I'm not the type of person to make excuses. That would be crossing a line I wasn't ready to cross yet. But she came back in a different form. It was a Wednesday afternoon, in a coffee shop I frequent near the office, the kind of place with worn wooden tables and low-volume jazz. Playlists that invariably smells of steamed milk and cinnamon. I was sitting with my laptop open, pretending to review a schedule, when the door opened and the bell above it rang, and I reflexively looked up. It was her. No lab coat. Wearing a dark navy blue coat and a backpack on her shoulder, her hair in a bun just like always, strands escaping from the left side, as if that's how her hair always looked when she was being herself and not the doctor. She saw me at almost the same time I saw her. The pause was real this time, not microscopic. A pause with weight, with both sides of it conscious. Claire. No question, just a statement of fact. Hi. This time I managed more than one syllable. What a coincidence. She glanced briefly at the cafeteria, then at me. Do you come here often? Often, and you? First time. She said it in a way that wasn't just information. A friend recommended it. She ordered something at the counter and this then matters. This then. I often replay in my head. She came back with the glass and stood near my table for a second, as if calculating something, and then said, "Do you mind?" He pointed to the chair on the other side. I cared. In the sense that I knew it would be difficult. That I would leave that coffee shop with even less peace than when I went in. No, I said, you can sit down, and she sat down. We stayed there for 40 minutes. We talked about things that were completely normal. She had a shift later. I had a delivery the next morning. The cafeteria got busier around 5 o'clock. Someone played guitar in a corner for about 10 minutes and we both listened without commenting, which was the strangest and most comfortable moment at the same time. And there was something between their words. In the moments when neither of them said anything, and they both knew it wasn't discomfort. It was something else, still unnamed, that neither of them was naming. She stood up when she needed to leave. She grabbed her backpack. She looked at me. It was good, she said. Simple. Direct. I wanted to ask what exactly had been good. I wanted to ask a lot of things. I didn't ask anything. And she left, leaving her place still warm. She messaged me 3 days later. I don't know how she got my number. Probably through the clinic's database, which is technically irregular, and we both know that. And the message was simple enough to have a plausible denial and specific enough not to have one. The coffee shop on 3rd Street has live jazz on Fridays. You seem to like jazz. I read it 3 times. You seem to like it. She had been paying attention. She had noticed that I hadn't said anything while the guy was playing the guitar, but that I had stopped pretending to look at the laptop. She had remembered that. I held the phone in my hand for far too long and then I typed, "I didn't know that. Thanks for letting me know," and I stopped before sending. I deleted it. I typed it again. I deleted it again. I sent, "Good tip." 2 characters less than necessary. Intentionally vague. The kind of response that could be read as interest or as courtesy, and I needed it to be read as courtesy because I still didn't know what I was going to do with the interest. She replied, "I'll be there on Friday." It wasn't an invitation. It was information. The distinction is important, and she knew that. She was giving me space to decide without either of us needing to name what was being decided. What consideration? What a torturous, careful consideration. On Thursday night, I was sitting on the edge of my bed with my phone in my hand, desperately wanting to text her and ask if she would be in the same place. At the same time, the simplest question in the world. 8 words, and I couldn't do it because 8 words would make it real. And something real could go wrong. And I already knew what it was like to lose something that was real. My ex taught me this in a way that still leaves a mark. So I stayed silent on Thursday night, and on Friday morning, I got up and had coffee and opened my laptop and pretended I was going to work. And at 4 in the afternoon, I closed the laptop and went to take a shower without having made any decision. And at 5:30, I was in front of a coffee shop on the 3rd Street wearing the brown wool coat that I like and my hair down because I wasn't admitting to myself that I had gotten dressed up. The decision had been made all along. I just hadn't let my mind sign it. She was there. And it was beautiful. The jazz, the low lighting, the way she saw me come in and didn't wave or smile. Just looked at me for a second with an expression I couldn't fully interpret and that I'm still trying to decipher. We spent 2.5 hours together. And then I left earlier than I needed to. I'm not going to try to make this sound more complicated than it is. I panicked. Not in a dramatic way, no tears, no argument, nothing she could point to and ask what's wrong. Just a gradual withdrawal that I know well in myself. I started answering in shorter sentences. I started looking at the clock. I invented a delivery for the morning that was real but not urgent. She realized it. I saw her realize it, but she didn't push it. She didn't ask. She just said, okay, when I said I had to go. And there was something about that okay that was the kindest and saddest thing I'd ever heard in a 2-word sentence. In the car, I put on music loud enough not to think and drove home and went upstairs and into the apartment and sat on the kitchen floor, my back to the refrigerator, without knowing exactly why the kitchen floor, but that's where my body wanted to be. I stayed like that for a while. In the following days, I didn't text her. Neither did she. That was the right thing to do. Neither of us was in a position to pull something I had already picked up myself. And that's what I needed. Silence and space, and the chance to convince myself that it had only been innocent flirtation with a situation that wasn't going anywhere. It worked for about 4 days. On the 5th day, I woke up at 6:47 again. My hour of anguish, I'd learned that, and she was back in my first thought. Not her smile, not her eyes. Her, it's okay. The gentleness of that, it's okay. There are people who, when you distance yourself, raise their voices. They insist, they pressure you, they let their resentment surface to make you feel guilty again. She had done the opposite. And that specifically was what I didn't know how to carry. The absence of someone you barely know shouldn't weigh on you. It doesn't make sense. There's no reasonable emotional justification. 2 weeks of sporadic, brief, undecided interactions. That's not enough to create a void. Every manual on human behavior I've ever read would say that. But my apartment was different. Not objectively. The same plants in the window, the same worn-out rug in the living room that I needed to replace 2 years ago. The same noise from the upstairs neighbor walking heavily after 10. Everything the same. But there was a quality of silence that had once been comfortable and now had texture, as if the silence knew something I was still pretending not to know. I went to the supermarket on a Monday afternoon and walked past the tea aisle. And there was a tea with green packaging that for some reason reminded me of the coffee shop, not the shop specifically. Just the atmosphere, the lighting, the soft jazz music. And I stood in front of the shelf long enough for a lady to ask me if I needed help reaching for something. I didn't need help to achieve anything. I needed other kinds of help that he couldn't give me. On Tuesday, I went for a run in the park near my house. Something I do to clear my head, and which only really works when my head cooperates. It didn't cooperate. I ran for 40 minutes thinking about her question at the coffee shop. Are you afraid of specific things or things in general? A strange question for a second date, and I had answered specific without thinking. And she had said me too, without elaborating, and I hadn't asked. And now I wanted to know what her specific things were. I wanted to so badly that it hurt a little not knowing. I started to wonder if she was thinking about me. This is a question I shouldn't ask because it doesn't have an easily accessible answer, and because the absence of an answer only increases the weight of the question. But I asked it anyway, about 3 times a day, at random moments in the elevator at work while waiting for the water to boil in the second before going to sleep. Was she thinking about me? She had filed it away as a flirtation that went nowhere because it didn't. Objectively, I made sure it didn't and moved on with the speed of a 27-year-old who has a lot ahead of her. Or she also woke up at 6:47 and 3 weeks after the jazz course, my body started giving me warnings beforehand. There was no way to know she hadn't shown up anywhere, hadn't texted, was completely out of my daily routine. But my body decided to maintain a state of slight alert, as if it knew something I didn't. I would go into places and become slightly alert without knowing what to do. I would raise my eyes in ways I didn't usually do. A friend of mine, Becca, called me on a Thursday and asked if I was okay because I'd seemed strange the last time we'd seen each other. I said I was great. She was silent for a second. The way Becca is when she doesn't believe you but decides not to press the issue. Then she talked about something else. I almost told them. I got close. There's someone who, and stopped, because saying it out loud would make it more real. And more real meant I would need to decide what to do. And I still didn't know what to do. That Friday I went to the clinic to pick up a form, something completely administrative, that I could have requested by email, and this time I know it was a pretext. I didn't try to convince myself otherwise. I went in, got the form, and left in 3 minutes without seeing anyone besides the receptionist. In the parking lot, I sat in the car and recognized what was happening with a clarity that came suddenly, as it always does when you stop protecting yourself from it. I wanted to see her. Simply that. No build-up, no justification. I wanted to be in the same space as her, and hear the specific cadence of her voice, and discover what the specific things were that she feared. I wanted to meet her. Not the doctor, her. I started the car and drove away without looking in the rearview mirror more times than necessary, which was already more than I should have. That night I received a message. Not from her, a list of work emails. But the phone vibrated at the same rhythm it does when it's her, and my heart did the same silly thing it did during the first call from the clinic. So this is how my nervous system is right now. Responsive to phone vibrations. I placed the device upside down on the table and opened a book I couldn't read, listening to the noise from my neighbor upstairs and wondering if there's a name for this specific state, not sodade. Because sodade presupposes you experience something first, not anxiety, because it's not exactly that. It's more like anticipation without a defined object. Waiting without a destination. The feeling that something is about to... She texted me on a Monday morning. There's a new coffee shop near the clinic. It's awful, actually. I was thinking of you. I stared at that sentence for too long, trying to decide if horrible was the point or just an excuse to send a message. I decided it didn't matter what the point was. I replied, "Are you going there again anyway?" "Tomorrow at 6. In the morning? Early shift. Nothing more." I could ignore it. I could reply, "Take care of the shift," with that light irony and let it go. I could do anything except what I did, which was to show up at the awful cafeteria at 6:05 a.m. on a Tuesday in November with the wrong coat for the cold and cold hands. And she was already there with a paper cup, dark circles under her eyes, and that expression of someone who had just worked 12 hours. "You came," she said. It wasn't a surprise. It was something else, something gentler. Because we sat down. The coffee was indeed awful, she was right. There was something cardboard about the taste, and we stayed there for 40 minutes, which were the last 40 minutes she was awake before sleeping all day. She was tired in a way that lowered her defenses, slowed her speech, and made the silences longer. At some point she said, "You left quickly that Friday." It wasn't an accusation, it was an observation. But I owe her more than just an evasive answer. "I went," I said. I was a little scared. She looked at me. "With what?" I stopped. The awful coffee was getting cold in my hand. The coffee shop was almost empty, with only a young barista arranging chairs in the back. "With what I was feeling," I said. The words came out more easily than they should have. "With the speed." She was quiet for a moment. Then, "Me too." We looked at each other, and there was so much there that neither of us knew how to carry it out aloud, yet the age difference, the professional ethics of that first meeting, the fear that we had both admitted to having of specific things without ever saying what those things were. "I don't know what that is," I finally said. "Me neither," she said. And there was something immense in that double honesty, in those two people sitting in a horrible coffee shop at 6 in the morning admitting that they didn't know. Not pretending to have more clarity than they did, not rushing anything, not backing down. She had to leave. She got up. She stood next to me for a second. "Claire." She said my name exactly as she had the first time, with a familiarity she couldn't possibly possess. "Thank you for coming." I meant several things. He said, "Cuida do sono." And she laughed. A real laugh, for the first time. A full laugh. And she left. And I was left sitting alone in the awful cafeteria with my heart pounding in a way that wasn't urgent. The time had come. It's been 3 weeks since that morning. Not much happened objectively. We texted each other, the kind of text about nothing and everything at the same time, mentioning terrible coffee and long shifts and songs we listened to and little everyday things we wouldn't send to just anyone. We saw each other 2 more times. The second time we walked in a park she knows, and we walked slowly because her feet were hurting from being on duty so long, and I didn't say anything but walked at her pace without her asking. She noticed. She said, "You noticed." "I noticed," I said, and nothing more. But it was enough. I don't know what this will be. That's the truth I can give you right now. I don't know. You don't know. I know there have been 10 years between us, and that our first meeting was in a doctor's office, and that the things we feel sometimes come in ways that reason doesn't approve of. I know I'm afraid of specific things, as I told her, and that one of those specific things is letting someone in and losing them again. But I also know what it's like to wake up on a Tuesday thinking about someone before thinking about coffee. And I know what it's like to hear my name said in a way that implies I'm complex. These days when I wake up at 6:47 a.m. and my first thought is of her, I don't try to understand what it means. I just let the thought exist for a moment. Let it exist with the weight it has, and then I get up and make coffee. It's November now. The trees have lost almost everything. My window shows bare branches against a low, white sky, which in Portland means it could snow any day. There's something about winter here that I've always found melancholic, but this year is different. This year, the emptiness of the branches looks more like space. Yesterday, she sent me a message at 7 a.m. that simply said, "The coffee here is okay today." I replied, "Progress?" She responded with a tiny heart emoji, the smallest one there is, almost too discreet to be interpreted as a declaration. I stared at him for a while. And then I put my phone in my pocket and left for work with a lightness I didn't know had returned. Not because everything was resolved, not because I knew what was coming next, but because sometimes the bravest thing to do isn't to move forward or retreat, it's about staying. It's like letting a little heart exist in your pocket while you walk on a cold morning. It's knowing that somewhere, the same person who asked you about your thoughts or feelings is also starting their day. And perhaps, just perhaps, also with an initial thought that isn't about coffee. If this story touched on something you couldn't quite put into words, leave a like and subscribe to this channel right now. This is the home of these stories. And I have more to tell you. If that echo is still with you when you sleep tonight, the next video starts exactly where that feeling left you. It will be here.